Hey everybody, and welcome back to Investing with Wesley. When I first started this channel, one of my very first videos was trying to teach you guys the difference between good debt versus bad debt. Now, admittedly, that first video didn't really get a whole lot of views because that was one of my very first videos and no one was subscribed to me yet. And in this video, I kind of want to recycle that topic, but add on to it and give you even more of an understanding now, since I trust that you've watched some of my more recent videos and have a broader knowledge of financial concepts. In my original video, I told you that good debt was basically extremely low interest rates that made it extremely cheap to borrow that money, whereas the bad debt was any debt that was greater than 4 or 5% and used on things that didn't really turn a profit or that depreciated rapidly. And the truth is, those statements are still accurate today as they were a year ago when I first recorded that video. Some people think that debt is the root of all evil and that you should never get into debt by any means necessary. And if for some reason you do get into debt, then you should scrimp and save every dime you can and cut costs wherever you can to pay that debt off as quickly as you can. These are the people like Dave Ramsey that say eat nothing but beans and rice in order to pay off all your debts as quickly as possible. Now, in my opinion, this methodology, although it works and it works really quickly, is the wrong way of thinking. You shouldn't be forced to scrimp and save just to pay off your debts. And on top of that, using debt properly is never a bad thing. And the same can also be said for the other side of the spectrum. There's people out there that think you should be completely leveraged in every possible way and that using other people's money is just the smartest thing you could possibly do. Now, both sides of the same coin are completely wrong. The truth is, when determining whether debt is good or bad, the answer is always, it depends. And really, the only way you could justify or figure out if one debt is good or bad is really the risk reward that you get in the long run. As an example, if you decide to go into $500,000 in debt, that's $500,000. If you decided to take that out in the form of a student loan and then become a medical doctor, the risk versus reward of you being able to pay that loan back and then profiting long term is great. So yeah, although $500,000 is a large amount of money, the reward that you get on the end is extremely great. Now, likewise, just because you got a degree doesn't mean it was worth the debt or the student loans. As an example, if you took out $500,000 and got a degree in liberal arts, chances are it wouldn't be worth it unless you're lucky enough to become a politician. So that's what I mean by it really just depends on the risk versus reward. Both of them are student loans, meaning you can't get rid of them by going bankrupt. And because they're both student loans, the interest rates on them are fairly cheap. So based on the information I gave you in my old video, yes, those would be good debts because it is so cheap. But at the same time, going into debt to get something that doesn't pay off in the end is never a good debt and would actually classify as a liability. Now, I already made a video on what the difference is between an asset and a liability, but in short, assets feed you or put money back into your wallet, where liabilities don't. They take money out of your pocket and drain your pocket. Now, I know I just said that a liability is something that drains your pocket, and here we are talking about debt, something that you have to pay back. So wouldn't all debt then qualify as bad debt because it's a liability? Well, that's where the it depends comes in. As an example, it will always be bad debt and it will always be a bad decision to buy a liability with another liability. As an example, if you used debt, a liability, to purchase a car, which depreciates rapidly as well as doesn't supply any money back to you, that's using a liability to purchase another liability. And that will always be bad debt. Now, you can mitigate this debt by having ultra low interest rate, but at the end of the day, you're still losing money on something that's not giving anything back to you. So even though the best possible scenario would be to have a 1% loan or even cheaper, it's still going to be bad debt. It just won't be as expensive as some other debts would. Now, using the same car purchasing example, you can actually turn a bad debt into a good debt by first using debt to buy cash flowing assets, and then using the cash flow from those assets to pay for the monthly payment on the debt of that vehicle. So as an example of purchasing a car using good debt, it would be using whatever money you had saved up as a down payment to purchase something that cash flowed. Now, if you had the money to put as a down payment for a house that cash flowed, chances are you could probably just pay cash for the car. However, what you could also do is move as much money as you can and invest as much money as you can into high dividend paying stocks like REITs. That is a real estate investment trust. Now, obviously, depending on the profitability and the dividend rate of this company, that will determine exactly how much cash you need to have invested to profit in the dividend and then use that dividend to pay for the payment. There's a million and one different ways to do this, But I want to give you an even better example that does have to do with real estate. I had a friend of mine wanting to purchase a home in a very particular neighborhood because they had really good schools and it was just a really good neighborhood. The problem was these homes were $1 million homes and he was going to put $200,000 down as a 20% down payment and then the rest would be a mortgage. Now, just talking principal and interest alone, that would have been like a $3,200 mortgage payment. Now again, we're not factoring in taxes, insurance, and utilities. We're just talking principal and interest. Now I told him he should think about renting instead because a $3,200 payment is pretty extreme. He told me that there was a few houses in that neighborhood that was for rent, but the rents were even greater than the mortgage, as you would expect. The rents were anywhere from $3,500 to $4,500, depending on how nice and updated those homes were. So I was brainstorming a little bit and I told him why not use his $200,000 that he would have used as a down payment and instead break that up and use it into 5 20% down payments and then purchase 5 $200,000 homes. Now obviously if he's going to purchase $1 million home, he has a certain expectation on what his livelihood is going to look like. So I told him that all 5 of those $200,000 homes were going to be rented out. And after using normal rental market data, we came up with a number that was $4,765 after paying back the mortgage balance. Now remember, the debt he was going to have versus the down payment he was going to have are the exact same. Now remember, in his plan, he was going to have $200,000 worth of cash as a down payment and then $800,000 worth of mortgage. And in my recommendation, none of those numbers changed. He still had $200,000 worth of cash or equity, and amongst the 5 homes had $800,000 worth of mortgage. So out of his pocket, the monthly payment was exactly the same. But he was now profiting after paying that mortgage back $4,755. So because of this, he was able to use the profits he got from his 5 rentals to rent the home he lived in that nice neighborhood that he wanted. Now you got to remember, the point of all this is that he was able to use the exact same cost basis to not only get the home that he wanted, but also secure 5 different rental properties. Now admittedly, he's a little shy of risk and a little shy of taking on that much debt. But after I showed him the numbers and showed him that the amount of debt he would be taking on is literally identical, just one option was diversified across 5 different rental properties and the other option is all the debt was on one home. I told him to think 30 years from now. In 30 years from now, if he bought that house, he would have a paid off house with equity of $1 million plus. Or if he chose the other option, he'd have 5 paid off homes, still with $1 million in equity, but now they're cash flowing assets. And since he no longer has a mortgage on them, his monthly profit immediately jumps up to $8,000 per month. Before my recommendation, he was in the process of creating a bad debt, and not only any bad debt, but an $800,000 bad debt. Sure, he was going to build equity in his home, and sure, it was a mortgage and he was going to pay it off. But you have to remember, liabilities drain your wallet. If he was going to be purchasing this house and living in it, then no money was coming in. Therefore, his primary residence and his mortgage would have been a liability. But instead, he converted that liability into rental properties and then used the profits of those rental properties to end up in the home that he really wanted. Instead of making a bad debt decision, he used the exact same amount of debt and made it a good debt decision. I hope you got value in this video, and I hope I helped you understand at a deeper level the differences between a good and a bad debt. And not every debt is bad debt. It all just depends on how you use it. If you did get value in this video, please remember to like and subscribe, as it really helps this channel get out there further. I have a dedicated Facebook and Instagram account. I don't post there too often, but if you ever had a question, comment, want something addressed, or even wanted to recommend a topic for a later video, feel free to message me there, as the YouTube comment section can kind of get a little confusing sometimes. Either way though, the choice is yours, and I'll see you in the next episode.